Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of the big fat activism, health at every size discussion. In part 1, if you haven't seen it, you can watch, I'll put it in the description, watch that first. We basically talk about, we kind of looked at what they had to say, looked at the evidence they tried to suggest, and then we kind of debunked and went through a counter argument for each of the point in that paper. So now we're going to move on to looking deeper into weight bias, not just in like healthcare but overall. And then I'm going to talk about my opinions on kind of the toxic behaviors I notice in fact activism in health every size community, and kind of my take on that, as well as look at an example of somebody. There's many examples, by the way, but this is just one person I came across who was prevalent in the fat activism community and has since kind of let's say woke up and took their health into their hands. But yeah, just a disclaimer, I disagree with fat activism being related to body positivity. I believe a lot of fat activism is under the guise of body positivity, but I think they're two completely different things. I see fat activism as an action, a vigorous action to bring about reform in society and to base society around bigger bodies or fat people. It's a growing community of change, whereas I see body positivity as not just about weight. I see it as acceptance and appreciation of all bodies, regardless of shape, size, skin, gender, physical abilities, and disabilities. That is a bigger community of all people, and I disagree with trying to merge them together, because I think fat activism overall is a cope and has a lot of toxic traits that should not be associated with body positivity. People in fat activism, they talk a lot about body respect, but what I see is not a lot of it. I don't see a lot of body respect. Obviously there are some, but I don't see a lot of that. If anything, I see a lot of disrespect for people's bodies, and they're very, very contradictory. So let's get into it again. Another disclaimer: I think any body is a human body and therefore should be accepted and should be respected, but behaviour is not. I purely think behaviour and health indicators are a bigger topic in terms of this. So let's start with this person. I have seen this video and I've made a few notes, but we'll get into it.
Just a few reasons why I've stopped using the word obesity. And if I absolutely have to use it, like in the title of this video, I censor it. So the word itself actually has very fatphobic roots. It comes from the Latin word obesus, which actually means having eaten until fat.
Right, so in the olden days, it was not very common to be obese unless you were someone with enormous wealth, and therefore you did not have to continually work every day with extreme labour or excessive labour or hard labour. You were able to sit around all day, and you were also able to consume rich foods on a continuous daily basis. And therefore, that is why the term means what it does. It typically means somebody who has eaten themselves into excess fat or adipose tissue. And yes, although not everyone who is obese may have eaten themselves to that way is the only factor, it may be other factors like medication or illnesses and such others like that. So yeah, and also we're talking about the vast majority here. Like the vast majority of obese people are that way because they have eaten themselves into fat access. Like they've excessive fat. They have more adipose tissue due to eating beyond what they need for their body and to maintain their body. That is the vast majority. And yes, there are factors that can affect that, but that is what the vast majority is. So, which is why I think it's still a valid term. And also, when we are talking about this word, not a lot of us are looking back at the Latin meaning of it. I just think a lot of it is a cope. The use of obese, I think, is a perfectly acceptable clinical term because that is a category that somebody falls into if they have certain markers and measures reach that category. I don't really have a problem with it.
That, particularly in a medical sense, suggests that fat people have eaten themselves to disease, which simply isn't true. The whole
Of course, majority of it is true, but not in every case. So I can see where she's going, where some people may not want to be classed as obese because it makes an unfair judgment of their habits that they may not have. Sure, I can understand the uncomfortability to that degree, but do we really want to be for the people who do have these food behaviors that are, putting them in a higher risk category in obesity and are obese, do we really want to change the word, bring about a new word, to be able to basically not hold these people accountable for their behaviors? I just think it's a bit of a cope. I just think it's too much. Like, I I mean, obviously, I've never been obese. I just managed to get myself into the overweight category, and that was because of my eating habits, and I accept that. So no, I've not been in the obese. I've never been obese, and I don't plan. I definitely do not plan to be obese. So I don't have the experience of that term being used on me, but I don't see the major issues with the term. I can see where they come from. It's uncomfortable, for sure. It is an uncomfortable word, but us as humans living life, we have to go through things that are uncomfortable. And it's similar in the way that we make changes that may be uncomfortable, but we do it for the better quality of life, the better experience, and to better ourselves. So I just think it's a bit of a cope. That's all. I can understand some of their opinions, especially this woman's opinion when she says it seems to put somebody in a category of they're obese, so they must have eaten themselves in that way, and that may not be the case, but the vast majority is. So I get it, but what do you want us to do instead? Like, not hold people accountable for their actions? Like, what do you want? What do you want? What word could you possibly want us to use? Like, you tell me, because I think it is. I don't think there's a problem with the word. I think people have a problem with hearing that they're obese. So I think it's a bit of a cope. But let's continue.
concept of obesity being a disease equates fatness with poor health. This can be hard for people to grasp, but
I mean, we've actually, I'll let continue, but we have discussed this in the previous video. So if you wanted more of a clinical opinion on that, you can go back.
Fat is not a disease that needs to be cured. In the same
No, fat is not a disease, but the habits associated with fat and the actual consequences of excess adipose tissue is a disease. So, fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoarthritis, all these things are contributed, and the risk of these things are contributed by excess adipose tissue or fat. So,
way that we can all agree there are plenty of unhealthy thin people in the world,
for sure, there definitely are.
there are also plenty of healthy fat people.
And though I do full-heartedly believe there is a peak body fat percentage range for men and women, which is between 12% and 20% for men and 20 to 30% for women, I do think it's not necessary to be in that range. Yes, in that range, it means your risks of diseases or illnesses that are associated with the lower percentage being too low or being too high, that it gets rid of, it minimalizes those risks. I do believe there is a lot of value in just small amounts of weight loss and even being in the body weight and percentage of body fat that's above the recommended amount, as long as that the blood concentrations of insulin are normal and are not abnormal and not insulin resistant, and they still have their protective functions. I do think it's possible to have a full healthy life if your body fat is slightly above 20 or 30%, depending on your sex. And I do think it's possible to have a high quality of life in the, above those ranges, above the body weight and above the percentage of body fat. And there are other factors that affect it other than, obesity and the consumption of food. It's I'm not saying we need these strict guidelines. I am saying that there's a peak, but I'm also saying that just a small amount of weight loss is massively beneficial. I'm not out here saying everyone needs to be exactly this percent body fat to live. That's absolutely ridiculous. That's not true at all. But I'm just stating that there is a range that is ideal.
Weight gain can indicate a health issue. It can also indicate recovery. So for many
Oh
people,
yeah, for sure. And this brings in the argument that not the argument. This brings in the idea that people in fat activism seem to have this association that they seem to think that people in the street. I mean, weight bias is a thing, right? But me, who I am, and what I don't go into the street and I don't go, oh, that's an obese person, so they eat like this. I don't make assumptions. If I don't point out people in the street and just see them as an obese person, I don't go, oh, that obese person there, that big person there. I don't do that. I don't think that way. When I see any person, I see them just as a person, or if I'm pointing someone out, I point out what they're wearing, what colour they're wearing. I don't instantly go, oh no, that fat guy, that fat lass, that fat person over there. I don't say that. I say that person with the short hair and in the red shirt. That's kind of how I identify people if I'm pointing them out, for example. I don't see people as that's an obese person. I see that as a person who happens to be obese. And yes, that is how everyone should be. We should not be making a judgment on someone just based on their weight because we don't know where they are in their life, what their mental health is like. We don't know what they've been through. We can't make assumptions on their behaviours based on their weight. That's how I see it.
myself included, being fat is far better for their mental and physical health than being thin. And
For sure. Like I can totally see that. If you have had an ED in the past, that has had significant health risks as well as mental health risks, and you are in a place where you are overweight, but you have higher health markers, good health markers compared to that time, and you feel mentally healthy. That's absolutely great. I'm not saying I have an issue with that at all. I just disagree with the fact that obesity, the term obesity, should be eradicated because it is a valid word and it's a clinical word, and we can't just be taking every word out of the dictionary or change the meaning of things because it makes you a little bit uncomfortable. Like for words that have very historical, traumatic meanings and things like that, I get that. Language has its place. Language is very important, and language in context is very important. But I do not think there is a problem with the term obese because it's a medical category. And yes, the origins of that word may be that it implies someone has eaten themselves into excess adipose tissue, but that is the vast majority. Sure, there are factors such as recovery or mental illness, physical illnesses, medication, etc. That can be the main contributing factor to someone being having excess fat or being obese. But the vast majority of people who are obese have eaten themselves into obesity. I still think it's valid.
categorizing fatness as a disease also directly enables medical fat phobia. And the research actually shows.
And yes, there is definitely medical fat phobia, or something I prefer to use, a term I prefer to use, weight bias or fat bias. For sure, that does exist.
That medical professionals are consistently biased against any patient that's labelled obese, which then means that fat people are consistently denied proper treatment and diagnostics just because of their size. It also invites social stigma because obesity isn't viewed like other diseases. It's viewed as a moral issue and always the fault of the person experiencing it.
For sure, and we discussed a little bit in the last video, and a paper, I'll bring that up in a bit, but there was a paper that talked about this. For sure, there is definitely stigma and discrimination in terms of in the medical world with obesity. I agree that stigma actively deters patients from seeking medical care and forms a lack of trust and leads a lack of trust between the actual clinicians and the healthcare workers and the patient, and does lead to misdiagnoses. Implicit weight bias does attribute to unrelated legitimate medical complaints due to weight. Like, you know, the fat activism people, they argue that stigma and discrimination are the kind of main cause of health problems, that rather than obesity cause the health problems. And my stance there is that stigma worsens the outcome, but it does not erase the biological effects of obesity. So that's where I stand there. But definitely there is weight bias in the healthcare world, absolutely. And there are things that can be done in order to improve this and to create a better trust and relationship between patients and healthcare. You know, there needs to be better communication. It needs to be patient first, person first language. I think patient engagement is the major factor. It's very important. There needs to be a discussion of conditions associated with being overweight or obese, not purely just the factor of being obese. You know, we should be looking at the issues surrounding it instead of just making a judgment based on someone's weight. I totally, you know, I get that. I'm totally for that. There needs to be changes in the healthcare system in terms of the implicit weight bias that it presents.
And then people use it as an excuse to be fat phobic under the guise of caring about their health. And that is hardly a surprise considering
They do care about their health though. Like, sure, there is weight bias where, say, someone comes into a doctor's surgery and they are having heart palpitations, their heart rate is constantly high, their blood pressure is high, and stuff like that. And a doctor may look at them and go, well, just lose weight. It's because of your weight, you know. But that person actually, it could be that their anxiety they have really bad anxiety, and which explains, you know, there's an overlap there with the symptoms, the high heart rate, the heart palpitations, the high blood pressure, and stuff like that. The correlation of anxiety and obese, you know, the symptoms kind of overlap there. But a doctor will look at their weight and go, oh, well, it's because you're obese. That's why. And yes, that should not happen. There needs to be proper interviewing techniques. There needs to be patient engagement. There needs to be better communication as a whole. It needs to be person first communication, not weight first. I absolutely full heartedly agree with that, because if that doctor had a better clinical approach to that, a person first approach, they would ask interview questions like, when is your heart rate highest, when do you experience these heart palpitations, asking more specific questions related to the symptoms. Then the conclusion they could come to is that these symptoms are actually more associated with anxiety. But why do they have this anxiety? Let's get the root to the cause. And it could be that their anxiety is related to their weight and their body image. That could be it, or it could be a sign of something else, like something traumatic happened. And actually, they are obese because of the comfort eating or the hinge eating that they've ended up um, engaging in because of that anxiety. The actual anxiety, the root to the anxiety, is the cause of all this. And that would be a better approach to, instead of going, oh, you're just overweight, lose some weight. For sure. I'm sure that happens every single day. Absolutely. And the same with depression. Oh, why you're depressed because you're overweight? No, we need to look at the root cause, and actually, obesity may be a symptom of that root cause of the depression, of the anxiety, this, that, and the other, or other medical conditions that attribute to that. Absolutely.
that, we've been taught to fear the obesity epidemic for as long as I can remember, as well as being consistently told.
We are in an obesity epidemic, though, and I can separate that from this issue because we definitely are in an overconsumption problem. We have overconsumption problems, and I have a problem with people who overlap all the overconsumption problems with overpopulation. In America and in the UK, I'll just use them two examples because they're the examples I know better. We do not have an overpopulation problem. We have room. We do not have an overpopulation problem. We are not so densely populated in places such as India or Pakistan and other places in the Middle East. We do not have an overpopulation problem. And this is more of a political perspective in the more political realm, but a lot of people use overpopulation as an excuse or as a reason to stop immigration or to monitor immigration in a more militant fashion. And it's just not it. We in the UK, we do not have an overpopulation problem. We can actually house people without going onto the Green Strait. I don't think we should be going onto the Green Strait. That is farmland. But we definitely have room for people. We're a small island, but we are not so densely populated that we have an overpopulation problem. Do we have an overconsumption problem? Yes, but it's not to do with overpopulation. And is there overlap between the two? Yes, and in other countries there definitely is. But we do not have an overconsumption problem in America and UK because of overpopulation. It is because we are consuming too much fucking food and too many resources. That is the problem. You know, we we are taking away resources as a world and over and densely over consuming in these specific areas in these specific countries. We do not need to have products. We do not need to have stuff on the market. We do not need burgers on the market that are over 1,200 calories, have 4 beef patties and 2 pieces of bread in it with bacon. We do not need that. That is overconsumption. We do not need that product to survive and live. It is a waste of resources. We do not need that. That is what I mean in terms of overconsumption. The overconsumption of random shit. I do not want to be given, 5 bath sets in plastic packaging. I do not need it. I don't need 6 kinds of body wash. I just need one thing to clean myself. And yes, would I prefer to have shampoo and conditioner so that my hair stays healthy and doesn't feel crinkly and dry as fuck? Yes, but I don't need 20 products that all do the same thing, or actually the vast majority of it does nothing. That's what I mean when I talk about overconsumption. I do not think we have a overpopulation problem in the West necessarily. And by West, I do mean purely America and UK, the USA and UK. Oh my god, complete tangent there. I am so sorry.
That it's always the individual's fault, despite the fact that there are literally hundreds of different factors that influence.
For sure, definitely, definitely. But the vast majority of people are obese because of overconsumption. They have excess fat due to overeating. And no, it's not everyone, but it is the majority.
Our body size. Instead of saying obese, I just say
Which is why we should be having more open patient clinician communication, definitely.
fat, which to me is just a neutral descriptor like short or brunette. And as much as possible.
So she's saying that she sees fat as a better word as obesity. Yeah, obesity in her terms, she says that that obesity implies that someone has eaten themselves to excess fat, that they've eaten themselves to obesity, they've eaten themselves to having more fat than one needs. Yeah, but doesn't the word fat mean the same thing? If someone is fat, it implies they have more fat than needed. I am so confused. This is so contradictory. She's made some points definitely in weight bias in the medical field, but I just see this as a complete cope. I see this as a complete cope when people have a problem with the term obese. Yeah, she's basically saying here that she has a problem with the word obese because the implications is that someone has eaten themselves to excess. Yes, but she's fine with being called fat. But being fat implies that you are predominantly fat. You you know it's making a generalized assumption that someone has more fat than anything else. Oh god, I can't.
Or I just avoid commenting on other people's body size at all.
I mean, we shouldn't have an opinion. We shouldn't judge someone on how they look because we don't know what's going on in their life. I absolutely agree with that. I totally agree with that. But we're making a lot of contradictions here when we bring in kind of the medical stuff. Again, weight bias exists, not just in the medical world, but in society in general. Weight bias, implicit weight bias does exist for sure. In any case, and it is a vast problem in the medical field because it prevents people from getting adequate care, and there are often problems with misdiagnoses due to that, and it is actually just become a preventative way of treating someone because they're not going to turn up to certain screenings out of fear of being marginalised and discriminated against. So I totally get that. But it just becomes very contradictory when she talks about this weight bias, but then she has a problem with two terms that mean the same thing. Anyway, yeah, I can agree with half of what
Totally thought to do my
person says.
eyebrows. Anyway,
Love
here
that
is the
jacket.
finished look and the outfit. Feeling very, very cozy because I'm off to a
Lovely
Christmas
colour.
market.
Do love that jacket. Pop off, Alice. That is absolutely gorgeous coat. Yeah, that was. Sorry, I keep going on so many tangents, and because I'm getting really animated, I don't know if you can hear my chair squeak. I'm constantly rocking back and forth and like doing this kind of stuff, so I do apologise. Yeah, so a paper that I can bring forth here. I looked at it in the previous part of this video, but impact of weight bias and stigma on quality of care and outcomes for patients of obesity. There is definitely some overlapping things between this paper and what Alice was saying. And I do agree, I definitely agree that implicit weight bias in the medical field and GP surgeries, doctor surgeries can definitely affect quality of care and the actual outcomes of patients for sure. So we can look at one of the figures here. So we have an obese patient, right? So um, the provider has stereotypes of the patient and they provide a biased decision making, and it can lead to outcomes that the patient does not want. Because there is the attitudes of enacted stigma, and then threatening environmental cues. So maybe in a doctor's office that's does not fit them, a chair that they do not fit in, and this can cause, the patient's avoidance of care, the stress, mistrust of the provider, poor adherence to recommendation, and poor communication. And then, it doesn't lead to the outcomes that the patient wants. When really we should be talking to a patient as a person who happens to be obese. And happens is probably a bit more of a passive word, but a patient who at the same time is obese. It's a person who is obese. It's not just an obese person. I have this same language issue in terms of disability. We should not be looking at someone as a disabled person. They are a person first and their disability after. That is not an autistic person, that's a person who happens to have autism. That's a person with autism, for example. We should not be making perceived judgments on someone based on their weight or whatever. We should be looking at them as a person first. Being overweight does not necessarily mean the person lacks intelligence or is morally corrupt, let's say. For sure. And I've kind of skimmed through this, but the outcomes, the conclusion that they've drawn, and the things that they want from the medical field has come to the same thing as that I've come to. We need to have a better understanding on the impact of stigma on the care for people with obesity. We need to provide a better quality of care um, that is patient first, not obesity first. And yes, obesity is itself a risk factor, but we need to be not just considering that as the only factor. There are other things at play. So for sure, we need to have a non-prejudice way towards people with obesity in the medical field, because it can actually contribute to worsening symptoms and misdiagnoses and etc etc. So absolutely for sure, I totally know what they're saying here. I agree there. So let's actually end on a more positive note. But this is kind of the thing I see a lot. Oh, let me just edit this. To apologise. There we go. We have gorgeous crystal here. Am I on the right thing? Yeah. So a lot of things we see in the fact activism or health every size community is a lot of contradictions, and that can often lead to an actual discrimination against people that have significantly lost weight or wish to lose weight. Um, um, and I mean, we've seen that with the most notable can be Angelica Unfiltered, for example. She was in the fat activism community, guised under body positivity. She was miserable. She wanted to change her life and have a positive effect on her health. And once she started losing weight and distanced herself from the toxic behaviors of fat activism, but still um, engaging in kind of body positive self respect, body respect elements, she was basically treated as if she had died and was kicked out of the community. So, you know, we have an example here of Crystal. It's a picture one, but we'll go through the pictures. So this is Crystal at the ER. Here she's in the bathroom. Here she's at the reception area, I assume. She's taking pictures of herself. So she's taking pictures of herself here because it marks an important day for her. So, life update: when a fat activist loses weight, trigger warning, weight loss. So, let's get into the description here. In November 2024, I had a blood sugar reading of 391, which landed me in the ER. This was a wake up call. I then started to work with my doctor in the Diabetes Resource Centre on getting on insulin. However, months of hard work on insulin alone didn't help my blood sugar go down. Absolutely. So, before we even talk about the rest, why does she have high blood sugar? Possibly because of her obesity and her diet. Yeah. And it just says here, having insulin alone did not help. So that shows that there's a bigger issue at play here. There's more. They've not gone to the root of the cause. They've diagnosed a symptom and they're managing a symptom, but that's not the root of the cause. So again, I'm not saying that she's experienced weight bias here. It could be that she has or she hasn't. But again, we need to be getting to root cause of things. So that's what we will see in a minute. Fast forward to mid-February 2025. So a few months later, I went to the endocrinologist and she put me back on Mounjaro, got me on an insulin pump and upped my metformin to control my type 2 diabetes. Then I started going to monthly massages and meal prepping. I'm also on 2 psychiatric meds that help me with binge eating. I told myself this is mainly about controlling your diabetes. So there we go. We have a bigger cause here. She's binge eating, possibly due to mental health issues. So she's on 2 psychiatric meds to help with that, as well as managing the symptom of her insulin resistance and high blood sugar by taking insulin and taking regular measurements and putting her on Mounjaro and metformin. So, you know, here we're getting to a more of a root cause. You know, we're not just saying, well, you've got this blood sugar reading because you're obese. She does, but she's taking the action, and with a few months, so it takes people years to get to the root of the cause. You know, so within a few months, she's actually getting psychological help to help with the symptoms of being obese due to her binge eating due to mental health issues. So, as of April 1st, happy April Fool's Day, everybody. I lost 27 pounds. So, you know, not a few months after, lost 27 pounds from my highest weight of 500 pounds. To be honest, the weight loss was unintentional, but when I got my props for working so hard on my health, I liked it. It's crazy to actually like people giving you props for that, even though I feel guilty about liking it. I felt guilty because I've been in the fat liberation body positivity for over 15 years and I speak against praising weight loss and diet culture. Here we go. Here is the biggest tell that fat activism has nothing to do with body positivity. Body positivity is the acceptance and appreciation of all bodies, regardless of shape, size, skin, gender, physical abilities, or disabilities. Yet they have a problem with people who are actively losing weight and taking health into their hands. And again, diet culture. I have massive criticisms of diet culture because in modern society, when we say the word diet, we assume we think of crash diets. We don't think of diet as a lifestyle change. We don't see diet as just our eating habits in terms of the sustainable long term. So she felt guilt. She felt guilty about taking her weight and her health, taking her health in her own hands because she felt that she'd be marginalised. She felt she'd be criticised by the fat liberation community. That is one of the biggest tells that fat activism itself is a toxic community, and that they want this massive political or sociological reform under the guise of body positivity. I don't think body positivity has much to do with fat activism. I see them as two separate things. Are there people in the fat activism, fat liberation community who actually do have positive traits and actually do see body positivity as what it is? Yes. Is it the majority? Absolutely not. A lot of it is just cope. Okay, so after I saw how fully taking care of myself resulted in weight loss, I made a decision to move forward with intentionally losing weight. So before it wasn't intentional, she was purely just trying to manage her diabetes, but she lost weight from doing that. So now she's fully in on it. Some people did mute me on Facebook. Girl, you're better off without them then. But most of my followers and Facebook friends supported me. Brilliant. You need people like that in your life. We can't be arsed with having people in our life that criticise us taking health into our own hands. They are trash. Get rid. I have been discussing my weight loss publicly now, and honestly, it feels good to be selfish in that way because I have been putting off losing weight because of me being in fat liberation. The fact that this poor lady thinks it's selfish to take her weight in her own hands. Oh my god, like it's selfish in a positive way, in that you're doing something for yourself. But it's the fact that it's seen as selfish to distance yourself from fat liberation. It's seen as selfish to take your way in your own hands. It's oh god, this is just a symptom of the toxicity of um fat activism, fat liberation. I just realised I've been reading off about it. You can't actually see what I'm reading here, so let's bring this way. I do apologise. I am terrible at this. We'll just sorry, love. We'll just cut you off there a little bit, and then bring this up a little bit more. Yeah, sorry, I'm still getting used to OBS and all that. Okay. So carrying on. If you want to pause it and read it for yourself, you can do. Just scroll down to where we were. But I can't neglect my health and I need better access. I'm not losing weight for vanity, but because life is so hard at £500. Agreed. This is what I advocate for. I do not criticize people's toxic or gross or whatever habits because of vanity. I do it because it's concerning, because a lot of these people have partners and people in their life that depend on them, and yet they're not taking their health into responsible hands. They're just treating it like crap. That's the problem I have. And it's not just themselves, they're sharing it with people. My younger sibling, he's severely autistic, and he put on a significant amount of weight at one point, which was not under my care. It was under his mother's care, who is not a good person and shouldn't have had children, in my opinion. But that's just my experience. Under her care, he put on a lot of weight. But I don't purely blame her. She's a neglectful parent. But he was watching this kind of stuff. He was watching people eat egregious amounts of food. He was watching competitive eaters eating massive amounts of food in one sitting. And though for people who has the mental capacity to make the separation of this isn't real, this isn't everyday life. They're a competitive eater, this is not what they're eating every day. They obviously work very hard at the gym and eat a more, a normal diet outside of this. This is not their average diet. And able to make that distinction between real life and social media. My younger sibling, he cannot do that. He does not have the capacity to do that. He is watching these things and thinking that's normal. That, oh, I can eat vast amounts of food. That's what he's thinking. He loves food, and unfortunately his love for food has not turned into, it's not something positive, it turned into something negative, because now he sees these people doing these things and he thinks it's normal. He thinks that's what he needs to do in order to just fit in, you know. He has now an unhealthy relationship with food because he started eating in mass amounts to copy people. That's what people with autism do. They take traits and they copy the actions of others in order to survive, in order to mask, in order to survive in society. And he's severely autistic. So that's what he did. And then in doing that, he, is under the effects of the dopamine of that excessive amount of food gives him, the short energy boost, the addiction of it. And then he's turned into, his food has become a unhealthy relationship, and I put the blame on social media and stuff like that. I limit his access to social media under my roof. He does have a phone, he does have a tablet, he loves his airplane and washing machine videos, and that's fine. But obviously, when he's not under my roof, he is not educated, he's not given the chance to be given context or anything like that. He's neglected under someone else's care. Under my care, it's not like that. If he's curious about something, if he needs context, I can see things that he's not going to understand and I provide context for him. So when I've seen him watching these things, I say that this is not normal for them. It's for entertainment. They are competitive eater. This is what that means. I provide visual aids. I give examples. And now, he's the damage has been done. Unfortunately, the damage has still been done, but we're getting there. And he's understanding a lot more about what is healthy, what's normal, what food is, see it as fuel, see it as something to enjoy in moderation, and stuff like that. And it doesn't help that the person who cares for him the other half of the time does not give a shit. She will actually engage in toxic diet culture her whole life and then does the opposite for her children. Both I am the only one amongst my siblings who is not overweight or obese. My older sibling is obese and has had a blood clot and has medical issues, and my younger sibling is in the overweight category. Their body fat percentage is higher than it should be, and that's something I'm trying to help with and educate them on, because they are both autistic. The older one's not severe. If anything, my autism is actually more severe than his, but it comes about in different ways. So, anecdote tangent, but I think it's all valid. Life at £500 is hard, of course it is, because of the weight stigma that you face. My older brother, he has heavy breathing, and that's one of the things that's really triggering for me, because it makes me think of my father in his last few months of his life, his heavy breathing and the kind of the death rattle that he had. He has excessively heavy breathing when me and my younger sibling are walking the dog, when we're out walking or traveling or getting somewhere. He's always behind us, he's always slower, he's always panting and struggling to keep up. And he has more injuries. He has goes over his ankle every now and then because of his weight, because of how it's affecting his joints. It is hard. Being obese is hard. It's definitely not easy. The physical aspects of being obese is difficult. And not only that, but because of the weight stigma, absolutely for sure, that you face, especially as a black woman, absolutely. Finding clothes is hard, yes. Access to public spaces is hard, yes. Public transportation is hard. Getting winded is hard. The world is just not made to accommodate us. That's true, and it's a sad fact that people do not accommodate for bodies of that size. But it's similar to the way that the world's not going to accommodate to people that are over 7 foot tall because it's not as common. And being obese, even though it's becoming more common, it's not something that the vast majority of the time is something you can control. You are personally responsible for it. You can't help if you're over 7 feet tall, but you can help if you are obese. That's something you can take control of, and you can take into your own hands, and you can prevent or stop, So that is why the world does not accommodate for larger bodies, because it's not the norm. It should not be the norm. It shouldn't be the norm. That's my stance. The norm should be a body fat percentage range that does not increase the risks of diseases, cardiovascular diseases, and obesity related issues and diseases. It should not purely be for vanity or aesthetics, but that's something that you personally can have, that is fine. I personally would love it when I have great vascularity on my forearms. I love being able to see the work I've put in there. I love being able to see some of the lines on my stomach of my abs. And stuff like that. That is purely for me, and that is the vanity aspect, yes. But it is mostly to do with the health and the longevity of life and quality of life that I care about. I already have crippling ADHD, which affects my life in a negative way, and being able to control have control of some medical things, of some aspects of my life, gives me a bit of relief from that out of control feeling of ADHD, because that's something I'm still working on. But where I am in terms of my in the medical realm of my weight and my size, and that my quality of life in terms of those kinds of things, that I am in control of that, and that gives me a bit more of a positive outlook on life. And my ADHD, being able to control that other part that maybe I have less control of in this part and I'm still working on. I hope that makes sense. I'm so sorry if it doesn't. But yeah, the world's not accommodated for everybody because it's based on what the norm is, and yes, that is ever changing. But obesity is something. Obviously, there are factors that can. There are cases where obesity is not something to be able to control, but again, that is a minority. So we'll not include that, but the world is not accommodated for people who who are able to control that. Obesity mostly is something you can control. The vast majority of people have control of that. They don't have control of whether they are what height they are, whether they are smaller or taller. They do not have control of the disabilities they are given, that they are born with, or that that are exacerbated by other things. Ever since I'm losing weight, I am in less pain, my clothes fit better, my mobility has gotten better, so I'll keep going. Absolutely. That is the reason for engaging in a healthier lifestyle, and for losing weight, and for separating yourself, distancing yourself from fat activism, because you are happier. What's better? Having a longer life where you are happier for longer and a sustainable happiness, or would you prefer being short term happy, being lazy and not wanting to take control of your life? Would you rather cope, or would you rather be genuinely happy? That's the question I ask people. Would you really rather just cope and just be, you only get happiness from the food going into your mouth and the short dopamine hit that you get there, and the ass claps that you get from people that don't actually matter? Or would you rather be happy for the long term and actually get the most out of life because you are healthy and you're engaging in things that will improve your life? That's the question I ask. So, this video has gone for a long time. I'm glad I split it up, or else this would have been 1 2 hour video. So yeah, we've gone through a lot there. Those are my takes with some of those prompts. I kind of want to end the video on more of my thoughts on the fat activism community and things I've seen. So a lot of people in the fat activism community blame fast food companies and the larger corporations for creating food and quote unquote brainwashing people. However, we as people have free will. So you hate and want to dismantle these companies, yet you eat them in masses and profit from the content around it. And I am talking about, social media, quote unquote influencers or people on TikTok who tag themselves in these fat activism community, fat liberation, whatever. But they're eating these what I eat in a day videos and showing these toxic habits. Yeah, I'm talking about food here and food behaviors, not disabilities and the like. Let's separate that. So these are the people who want radical, so-called radical change in politics and society, for so-called good reasons. But this is a cope and a way to make money. That's how I see it. You're exploiting yourself and you're exploiting people like my younger sibling who do not have that capacity to separate reality from social media or whatever. You exploiting these people. Do you really feel good? First of all, enacting these behaviors and having that lifestyle, and then actually exploiting these people who are insecure and vulnerable. You talk about how people like people who are lean or go to the gym or fitness influencers, quote unquote influencers, people like me who provide commentary on these things or react to what you're doing. You think we are exploiting you? You think we're exploiting you? You're exploiting people on social media by acting like you can be successful and happy by being obese and by eating egregious amounts of food, over consuming, causing world problems by consuming too much resources, consuming too much food, too much plastic packaging, too much this and the other. You think we are exploiting people's insecurities? No, that's what you're doing. You're exploiting people's insecurities. You're exploiting people who feel powerless, who feel insecure, and have such uh, low self esteem because of their weight and their obesity and the symptoms that they have. You're exploiting that because you're saying, come into this community where we value you, where we're happy that you're fat. We're happier because we are fat. And you're not. You're just profiting off it. You're using that as monetization, using it as both a cope for yourself, but also monetizing off that. So, yeah, sorry, I got a bit heated there, but yeah. So to end this video, this is where I stand, and this is what I speak for. If you're going to listen to any of this and hold me accountable for it, this is what it is. 1. I criticise the promoting. I criticise promoting toxic habits. I criticise the monetization of promoting toxic habits. And by that, I mean eating egregious amounts of food, over consuming the world's resources, and also just having overall unhealthy behaviours. 2. I stand and speak for lacking personal accountability. I think the majority of fat activism is itself a cope, and people who do fall under that category lack personal accountability and may or may not be very lazy and would rather just live a very short term quote unquote happier life instead of actually doing the work and doing something for themselves and the people around them. And 3, I criticise maintaining the toxic cycle of misery under the guise and the cope of body positivity. I think body positivity, in terms of fat activism, is an excuse to exploit others for clout, exploiting kids and vulnerable adults like my younger siblings for money. You are criticising these large food corporations and society as a whole for brainwashing you, yet you are the same as these corporations. You are exploiting yourselves and others. I reject the politicalization of fatness. I don't promote bullying, but health every size is a no-go for me. Is there some things that overlap and things that are true? like implicit weight bias? Absolutely. Is there a separation from obesity and disease? Absolutely. But we're talking about what's going on now in the world. We're talking about the vast majority of people being obese due to overconsumption, not just because of other factors. So yeah, that's where I stand. Sorry for the very more serious or aggressive two videos this week, but that's. I just think I want to make myself clear. That's where I stand in terms of activism. That is why I'm doing this, because I have my personal anecdotes. I have my personal things that make me want to voice my opinion and criticize this community, because it's affected and someone in my life in a negative way, two people in, well, many people in my life in a negative way, and I do not stand for it. I think it needs to be dismantled, and I think people need to just start taking personal accountability, like this amazing woman, Crystal, and Angelica Unfiltered. And other YouTubers, Honey Bison, Melina, who was obese and decided to take her life into her hands and actually take control of the situation and take personal accountability. You know, unfortunately, there are people who are unable to do that. There are people who do not have that control and is unable to take their health into their hands out of their own control, and it's not their fault. And that's being exploited by these fat activism people. They are saying that they are just like that when they're not. They're just people who are lack personal accountability. So that's where I stand, and that's where I'll end it. I'm going to be off for 2 weeks, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get anything out. Maybe short form content. I'm not sure, but we'll see. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching if you're still here, and I'll see you soon. Bye.